Sometimes at Charity Watch, we get asked about organizations that aren't actually charities. Let me tell you what I mean. My name is Lori Styron. I'm the CEO and Executive Director of Charity Watch. We're a national charity watchdog and rating organization founded in 1992 and based in Chicago, Illinois. So we're asked about charities, but they don't actually exist, at least not as separate organizations, meaning if you look online or look in public databases, with the city, state, or federal government, you can't find the name of that organization in these databases. Well, how are they asking you for money if they don't exist? Well, this is how they do it. They actually do exist as sort of loosely organized, organizations. They might even be incorporated as a legal entity at a certain point. But basically, they run their charitable programs through something called a fiscal sponsorship arrangement. Basically, there's a type of charity called a fiscal sponsor, and that charity has 501c3 public charity status with the Internal Revenue Service. They don't pay taxes on most forms of income, and they're able to give you a tax deduction on any donations that you give. So what do? Sometimes when there's very new or small organizations that are still in the process of applying for their own tax exempt status, the fiscal sponsor will essentially lend these organizations its own tax exempt status. And in addition, typically in exchange for a fee, they'll also handle that small organization's accounting and legal and reporting requirements and any administrative types of issues that come up. And then the charities, the smaller charities, pay them a fee. I use the word charities loosely because these small organizations, they're not technically legally public charities under the tax code. They technically don't exist. They really function more as programs of the fiscal sponsor, even though they're out there in the world asking for people, asking people for donations as individual organizations. And in some cases, quite a lot of money can end up flowing through these small organizations, sometimes millions of dollars. And it's really frustrating because you can't find separate tax filings or audits of these organizations. You can't understand, well, what are their governance policies? What salaries do the people make who are running these programs? What do they earn? All other charities have to report those things to the public. Well, why don't these? So here's when it's a problem and here's when it isn't. When there's a very new organization that's just starting up, it's raised $8,000, it's getting going, it's trying to get it on its own 2 feet. A fiscal sponsorship arrangement is great for that because they can handle, they can allow the little nonprofit to start raising money from the public without paying taxes on it, to offer their donors tax deductibility on their donations. In the meantime, that little org can apply for tax exempt status with the IRS. It can, start working on putting its own board of directors together. It can file its articles of incorporation and create bylaws so it can get its governance house in order, but start operating programs and taking donations in the meantime. Then once it's established as its own entity, it spins off from the fiscal sponsor and it's its own separate charity, and then it is subject to all of those reporting and accounting requirements that you can go online and find information about. The problem comes in is when these arrangements are what Charity Watch thinks of as abused. Not everyone in the nonprofit sector would agree with that, but it's really a bad use of fiscal sponsorship when you have a loosely organized group of people essentially functioning as their own nonprofit organization, but sort of outsourcing some of the administrative functions to a fiscal sponsor. And they might be raising $1 million, $5 million, $10 million a year as this organization that essentially has no public accountability, because a fiscal sponsor organization might sponsor dozens of these small organizations. And under IRS rules, auditing reporting rules, the financial activities of all of these separate organizations are reported in aggregate, just in lump sums together with the fiscal sponsor's financial reporting in almost every aspect. Sometimes audits have breakouts of, some receivables or certain other things, but for the most part, there's very little information about the individual programs, these individual sponsored organizations. So if you want to know hey, I gave $100 to this specific organization. How was my money used? You go to the tax filing of the fiscal sponsor, and it's a $100 million organization that sponsors dozens and dozens of these little organizations. And there's no breakouts whatsoever showing you how your money was used, how anyone's money was used for that individual organization. So this is a problem, and Charity Watch has reported on certain fiscal sponsorships arrangements that have been highly problematic over the past few years. So please come to our website at charitywatch.org. This subject is pretty complicated, but this was just a little rundown for you, and it's a real black hole of accountability, some of these fiscal sponsorships. So Charity Watch encourages fiscal sponsors to choose to be more transparent in their financial reporting about how their sponsored organizations are operating, even if that disclosure is not strictly required by law. My name is Lori Styron. I'm the CEO and Executive Director of Charity Watch, and I hope this information was helpful. Thanks, everyone.